Today, we are staring into the abyss of the final confrontation.
We really are.
We have spent 4 seasons watching these characters grow, fight, fall in love, and just survive against truly cosmic odds. But now, as the final curtain looms, the central panic is setting in.
Yeah, that big question.
Who lives and who dies?
And it's more than panic, you know? I think it's the ultimate narrative test for the showrunners. The fear is that they'll reach for cheap shock value.
Right. Just killing a beloved character to get headlines.
Exactly. But if we trust the established mechanics of, serialized storytelling and the internal consistency the show has built, we can actually predict the final fates with, I think, surprising accuracy.
And that's the mission today. We're going to try and move past pure emotion and apply some cold narrative logic. We're analyzing 4 seasons of character development, sacrificial patterns, and the foundational identity of the series, which, let's be honest, is a powerful coming-of-age story. It's just disguised in this massive horror epic.
That's it, exactly. Our working hypothesis is that the writers are going to stick to the logic they've spent years building. I mean, every meaningful death in this series, from Barb all the way to Eddie, it has served a clear narrative function. It either catalyzes action or completes an arc. So the question we have to ask for every main character is simple.
Does their death serve the story?
Does it serve the overarching story, or is it just emotionally arbitrary? Is it just cruel for the sake of it?
Okay, so let's unpack the framework we're using for this. We've broken the entire cast down into these distinct categories based on their function and their vulnerability. This isn't about who we want to survive.
No, not at all.
It's about who the story needs to survive.
Right. So we're going to start with the untouchables. These are characters protected by, genre constraints in their age.
Right.
Then we'll move to the fake-outs.
The ones who might die for a bit.
Exactly. The central figures who are highly likely to suffer a dramatic, temporary death only to be revived. It maximizes the plot twist and the emotional stakes without that final permanent loss.
And then we get to the high-stakes adults. We're splitting this group into 2. Those facing a potential shock factor death.
A voluntary, heroic sacrifice for maximum heartbreak.
And then the more likely sacrifices, characters whose arc has kind of stalled or whose function demands that one final selfless act.
And finally, we'll analyze the highest risk group, the expendables. These are characters whose death creates significant emotional fallout for the core groups, but it doesn't derail the main mission. And of course,
big bad.
The guaranteed end for the final antagonist.
So let's jump right into the narrative safety net.
All right. So these are the characters whose death would fundamentally violate the established rules of the series, the almost unbreakable rules.
Yeah.
And the first 2 are protected simply by their age and their primary role in the story.
And that's Erica Sinclair and Holly Wheeler. I mean, Erica, for all her magnificence and her quick wit, functions primarily as comedic relief.
She really does. She injects that energy and truth into situations that are just overwhelmingly grim. And what's interesting about her is her narrative placement. She's an amazing character. We all love her, but she lacks that deep foundational connection to the central dynamic.
The 11 will Mike axis.
Exactly. She doesn't have that connection that most sacrificial characters possess. So her death would be an outlier. It wouldn't drive the central conflict. It wouldn't resolve a major emotional debt.
It wouldn't complete an arc for her?
No, because she hasn't had that same level of trauma yet. Her death would just be, like we said, arbitrary cruelty. And while the show is dark, it does maintain a moral center. Killing a character whose main purpose is comedic grounding that just breaks the genre contract with the audience.
And if Erica is protected by her narrative function, then Holly Wheeler is protected entirely by her extreme youth. He's the ultimate genre constraint.
Absolutely.
This series is heavy, but consistently, it avoids that specific, deep level of tragedy involving the really young, innocent children.
And that constraint is why we can be almost certain that this specific theory floating around about Holly.
That she goes missing.
Yeah, that she may go missing briefly, maybe in episode 2 or 3. It's purely a tension-generating device.
I like that structural analysis because the writers need to raise the stakes immediately for the adults, right? Especially for Karen Wheeler, who we'll talk about later, and obviously for Nancy and Mike.
The immediate fear of Holly being gone is a massive motivator. Yeah. It's a perfect plot tool.
It generates immediate, intense stakes and panic.
Before a swift rescue. If she were to actually die, it would just be for devastation. There's no necessary plot payoff related to Vecna's defeat or closing the gates.
It's just gratuitous.
It's a gratuitous tragedy that would poison the conclusion. Her survival is guaranteed, even if her brief disappearance kicks off a major action sequence.
Okay, let's move to the other two members of the original party, who are also, I think, narratively protected. Dustin Henderson and Lucas Sinclair. They're just so essential to that coming-of-age core.
They're the emotional and comedic ballast of the entire series. I mean, they're main characters, yes, but their function is often as supporting anchors. Dustin is the science and the optimism.
And Lucas is the pragmatist.
He's the steady pragmatism and, the emotional tether to Max. Their survival maintains the integrity of that original friend group.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second. Wouldn't the death of Dustin or Lucas be the ultimate tragedy for Mike and Will? Why doesn't that make them high-risk candidates?
That's a good question. It comes down to the principle of foreshadowing. In complex, serialized writing, a meaningful death has to be earned. It has to be foreshadowed, whether it's subtle or overt.
You need to see the signs.
Right. You need moments of isolation, despair, or some kind of self-destructive behavior leading up to the final act. And if you analyze Dustin and Lucas across 4 seasons, neither of them has received any significant recurring foreshadowing toward an ultimate self-sacrifice or death.
And that is the narrative flag we just can't ignore. Their deaths would come out of nowhere. For a character so integral to the original dynamic to die suddenly after 4 seasons with no setup.
No lingering illness, no dark bargain, no repeated acts of extreme recklessness.
From a writing perspective, it would just feel like cheating.
Their function is stability. Their survival reinforces the idea that the core friendship, the ultimate source of light in this dark story, remains intact. You can't tell a story about friendship conquering evil if the friendship itself is completely annihilated by the end. You need those anchors for the surviving core trio to move forward.
Now we get to a character whose fate is protected specifically because the show already wasted its chance to kill him.
Yes.
Jim Hopper. He's the ultimate fake-out factor, but his earlier survival kind of acts as narrative armor now.
The problem with killing Hopper in the final season is one of emotional spending. We, the audience, we already grieved for him at the end of season 3.
We went through it, the letter, the despair, the mystery.
Right. We watched Joyce desperately pursue the chance of his survival. We followed that entire Russian prison arc to bring him home.
It was a huge multi-season emotional investment. We paid the emotional debt for him already.
Exactly. So if the writers kill him off now, after all that effort, all the payoff with 11 and Joyce, it doesn't feel tragic. It feels like dramatic bankruptcy.
It just cheapens it.
It cheapens the immense emotional labor that was invested in his rescue arc.
Yeah.
Killing him now would just negate the emotional resonance that was built up around his survival and his reconciliation.
And it negates the powerful thematic return of the lost father figure. I mean, he earned his reunion. The show has to allow him to complete his protective father hero role. That's the payoff we were promised by his return.
Killing him would just be poor storytelling. It retracts the emotional investment the writers successfully got from the audience. He is now narratively protected by the simple fact that he already died once.
Okay, we can apply similar, though, distinct logic to Max Mayfield. Her fate has been the most intense cliffhanger from last season.
It really has.
She's physically incapacitated. She's trapped in Vecna's consciousness.
And Max's arc is one of the most powerful thematic statements in the entire series. She already performed the heroic sacrifice that was required of her character in season 4.
She faced Vecna, was nearly killed, and was only brought back by Eleven's last gasp efforts.
So her entire narrative function in the final season is defined by her current state. Her mental battle, her connection to Vecna, her physical recovery, or lack thereof, that is going to be the central pivot for a major subplot.
So to have her die now, after that massive climactic effort to save her, after the trauma of her near-death experience, it would just feel
pointless. It would be narratively pointless. She has already paid the ultimate price, short of death.
So I think we need to talk about the concept of the scar tissue narrative here. What if Max survives but not fully? Maybe she never gets her sight back or remains partially paralyzed. What does that contribute to this story?
I think that's a much stronger thematic takeaway than a full recovery or another death. Her survival, even if she's disabled, provides a permanent physical reminder to the group and to us, the audience, of Vecna's power.
The cost of the fight?
Exactly. The cost of the fight and the fragility of life. Her physical state becomes a monument to the war.
A permanent reminder that while they won the battle for her soul, the war left lasting damage. So her survival, in whatever impaired state, is necessary to pay off the emotional investment and the efforts made to save her. She represents resilience, not ultimate tragedy.
Absolutely. Her character arc has progressed beyond the need for death. Her final confrontation is about life in the shadow of trauma. She will survive the final confrontation even if she never fully heals.
All right, we've established the safety net. Now we move to the characters whose deaths would generate maximum emotional chaos but are still, fundamentally protected. The core trio.
11, Mike, and Will.
The analysis suggests that a permanent death for any of these primary child protagonists is highly unlikely, but a temporary one is highly probable.
This is where the narrative mechanics get a little more sophisticated. We're moving into the territory of the fake-out death, which is a device the show proved it can use really effectively with Max.
Right. And we mentioned the genre constraint earlier. You almost never permanently kill the primary child protagonist in a foundational coming-of-age story.
Because doing so means the story about their future just stops. It's over.
But Max's near-death proved the show is willing to pull the trigger, make us grieve, and then use a massive power surge or emotional connection to bring them back.
And that allows the writers to harvest the maximum emotional impact of a death scene, the grief, the sacrifice, without having to deal with the permanent, irreversible narrative loss.
So let's focus on 11 first. Her power level, her central role, and her unique, powerful link to the threat make her the most likely candidate for this ultimate sacrifice and revival loop.
This is where we need to dive into the deep-cut comic book analogy. There's a very strong theory that 11's arc is setting her up to be analogous to Jean Grey from the X-Men.
Oh, interesting.
The mutant link to the Phoenix Force.
Okay, so that analogy needs a little unpacking. What's the key parallel between 11 and the Phoenix Force?
The key parallel is the relationship between immense cosmic power and death. Jean Grey often dies, but her death is not final. It's a necessary transformation. She's resurrected, and she's far more powerful because of her connection to this fundamental cosmic entity.
So if 11 goes through a similar temporary death, it signals that her power isn't just psychic. It's potentially tied to a massive restorative cosmic force within the Upside Down itself.
Or maybe even an alternate dimension, yeah. The prediction isn't just that she sacrifices herself, but that the sacrifice activates something deeper. Her temporary death is the mechanism for the ultimate final victory.
I see. So the prediction is that 11 will sacrifice herself or die temporarily to defeat Vecna or seal the final gates.
And the mechanism for her revival wouldn't just be convenient, it would be tied directly to her unique power. Perhaps her friend's love acts as the anchor, or maybe the sacrifice allows her mind to integrate with the Upside Down's power structure and then return, fundamentally changed and strengthened.
That death and subsequent revival would serve multiple purposes. It resolves the ultimate conflict through self-sacrifice. It validates her power as restorative, not just destructive.
And crucially,
it allows the series to end with her survival, preserving the core found family theme.
It's the highest dramatic peak you can get without the most devastating emotional trough.
But how do the rest of the trio fit into this? If 11 is the catalyst for her own revival, what role do Mike and Will play in this high-stakes dramatic equation?
Their roles are vital, but they're secondary to her direct confrontation with Vecna. They provide her emotional stability and motivation. Their connection to her is that emotional thread the writers have been strengthening since season 1.
So if either Mike or Will suffers a near-death experience alongside 11, the prediction is that her power, or the surge from her revival, would be the catalyst for their return as well.
And this is where Mike's specific emotional rhetoric comes into play. You have to recall his crucial "you are the heart" speech from previous seasons.
Right.
If 11 is sacrificing herself, she needs a reason to return. She needs an anchor back to the living world. And that anchor is Mike.
So Mike's role is not physical heroism. It's more of a spiritual or emotional catalyst. His love for her, his desperate plea, that's what pulls her mind back from the brink.
And it completes that massive emotional loop, reinforcing the theme of love overcoming all.
And what about Will?
Will's role is even more unique. He is mentally linked to the threat. He spent time in the Upside Down. He has a sensory connection to Vecna. If 11's sacrificing herself, Will might be the one who can navigate the mental landscape of the Upside Down.
And facilitate her return.
Or prevent Vecna from absorbing her fully, yeah.
Will's history of trauma makes him uniquely equipped to function as a spiritual guide or a mental anchor in that final moment.
His ability to sense the threat could be repurposed. He can't defeat Vecna with a punch, but he might be the one who mentally identifies the crack in the door that allows 11 to push back through after her temporary death.
So the core trio's biggest threat isn't permanent death. It's a shared temporary disappearance and revival, all designed to maximize the twist and prove their ultimate bond.
That's the most narratively sophisticated path forward for them.
Okay, so if the core kids are safe, the emotional pain has to fall onto the older teens and adults.
It has to.
Let's shift our calculus now from plot function to emotional impact, starting with the group that would deliver the maximum shock and heartbreak, the fan-favorite heroes.
We're talking about Steve Harrington, Robin Buckley, and Nancy Wheeler. They're the primary heroic, non-superpowered fighting force, and they collectively function as the Trojan horse of fan service, the characters the audience most expects and hopes will survive.
And if one of these three were to die, the analysis suggests it has to be a very heroic death of their own volition.
Absolutely. It couldn't be arbitrary or sudden. They are too beloved, too central to the action, for anything less than a profound, chosen sacrifice that guarantees the safety of others.
So let's start with Robin Buckley, a massive fan favorite. Her death would generate a major impact, especially on Steve.
Her storyline is really focused on identity, friendship, and self-acceptance. Her relevance to the core plot, the 11-will conflict, is a little less central than Nancy or Steve's.
Which means her death would primarily serve the audience's pain and the emotional fallout for Steve, rather than being a plot necessity for Vecna's defeat.
Right, it's a pure shock factor choice. Now, the actor has reportedly been open to an emotionally impactful death. But from a narrative standpoint, eliminating Robin is a high-cost emotional investment for the writers with relatively lower plot payoff compared to the potential sacrifice of, say, a character like Joyce.
I have to challenge the Steve Harrington prediction, though. You mentioned he's the least likely because he's the audience favorite. But doesn't the show's established pattern of tragedy kind of demand that the character who has grown the most pays the highest price?
That is the compelling counterargument, and it absolutely makes him a tragic, high-risk candidate. Steve has completed the most beautiful and complex redemption arc in this series.
From arrogant bully to
selfless protective babysitter. His arc is arguably narratively complete.
And completion often means resolution, which in a high-stakes series like this can translate to ultimate sacrifice. His death would be the ultimate proof of his maturation. It would cement his legacy as a true hero who prioritized the younger generation.
And if he dies, it is the most devastating choice the showrunners could possibly make for the audience. The only thing protecting him is that sheer popularity and the need for some emotional comfort at the end. His death would require immense narrative justification.
He'd have to save all the kids.
Or sacrifice himself for Nancy. It's the highest heartbreak, and that makes it dangerously possible.
Okay, now, Nancy Wheeler. She is constantly, perpetually involved in extreme danger. She's the investigator. She's the first one to charge into the Upside Down.
Her continuous proximity to danger just makes her a high-risk candidate due to exposure alone. She has a high-danger constant. But more importantly, her death has immense rippling effects across multiple core dynamics.
Her death impacts Mike, a profound emotional blow to one of the central protagonists, and it impacts Jonathan and Steve.
It resolves that love triangle in the most final, agonizing way possible.
Right.
Nancy's death would force Mike to his emotional limit. It could even activate that revival catalyst we talked about if he were suffering a near-death experience at the same time. Her loss fundamentally alters the future of the Wheeler family and the love triangle. Among that shock trio, she has the highest utility for maximizing plot and emotional damage at the same time.
Okay, let's transition into the sacrifice duo. These are characters whose death isn't just impactful, it resolves a deep narrative function. These are the strongest candidates for a selfless, meaningful sacrifice. We're talking about Joyce Byers and Jonathan Byers.
And the reason both are high-likelihood candidates stems from their web of connection. They are closely linked to nearly every important character. Mike, Will, 11, Nancy, Steve, Hopper.
The death of either would be a huge plot point.
Huge. It would ripple across all the surviving groups and guarantee lasting consequences.
Let's look at Jonathan first. Critically, his storyline really began to stall around season 3. He moved from being the complex, protective older brother and outsider artist to a much more passive role.
He became an observer, a supportive background character for Nancy and Will. His arc lost momentum.
So his final narrative purpose then needs to be something grand. A sacrificial death would serve the crucial function of providing the ultimate resolution to his character arc.
It gives him a meaningful finish. It allows him to step out of the shadows of Will's trauma and Nancy's heroism and complete his journey by protecting those he loves.
Probably Will or Nancy.
Or potentially the key to the final battle itself. It's the highest form of redemption and narrative closure for a character whose story had felt a bit adrift.
And if Jonathan dies, the emotional fallout is maximized for Will, leaving him without his primary protector, and for Nancy, creating intense grief that impacts her final resolution with Mike or Steve.
Right. But let's look at his mother, Joyce Byers. Her motivation for self-sacrifice is perhaps the most pure and compelling in the entire series.
Joyce has always been defined by her ultimate, fearless, protective nature. She was willing to defy reality, fight the Demogorgon through walls, travel to Russia.
All to save her children. Her survival instinct has always been fueled by her family.
And since adopting Eleven after season 3, she's extended that fiercely protective nature to a non-blood related child. 11 represents the ultimate extension of Joyce's protective purpose.
So a self-sacrifice for 11 would be a beautiful act. It completes her protective nature arc in the most profound way. Giving her life for her chosen daughter provides the deepest emotional punch, reinforces the theme of found family over biological ties, and
it maximizes the pain for Hopper?
For Hopper, who would lose the woman he just spent an entire season fighting to get back to.
So what would that scenario look like? If Joyce sacrifices herself, it likely involves closing the final gate or defending 11 during her final confrontation with Vecna. What kind of emotional legacy does that leave?
It creates a tremendous burden on 11 and Hopper. For 11, it's the ultimate expression of love from her new mother, cementing her belonging in the Byers-Hopper family, but forcing her to immediately deal with that profound loss.
And for Hopper, it's just intensely bittersweet. He found his family unit only to have the center of it torn away.
And this allows the series to end on a complex, painful, yet ultimately uplifting note about heroism.
The key takeaway here seems to be that the analysis strongly suggests that both of them are not dying. The writers would not completely orphan Will and 11.
No, that would be too much. But one of them is highly likely to pay the price. If the show aims to maximize the emotional fallout for Hopper and 11, Joyce is the target. If the focus is on Will's character growth and Nancy's future, Jonathan is the target.
That choice dictates the entire emotional color of the final moments of the series. But a sacrifice from this duo is necessary to prove the highest stakes are real for the main cast.
Absolutely.
Now we move into the highest risk category. Characters who are in the right position to die. The expendables, the redeemers, and the primary antagonist.
Right.
Let's start with the least appreciated family in Hawkins. The Wheeler parents, Ted and Karen.
We can start with Ted Wheeler. He is functionally expendable to the plot. He's the physical embodiment of blissful ignorance in Hawkins. For 4 seasons, he's been asleep, detached, and utterly unaware of the cosmic war being waged in his own basement.
I mean, if he died, Nancy and Mike would probably just think he was napping extra hard.
He has no emotional function other than comic relief through his lethargy. His death would be impactful purely for Nancy and Mike, triggering some grief, maybe a moment of regret, but it wouldn't derail the mission against Vecna. It checks the box for localized emotional damage without crippling the core team.
But Karen Wheeler is much more interesting. The analysis suggests she might not be nearly as passive as she appears.
Precisely. The showrunners made that odd decision to give Karen her own character poster last season, despite her having minimal actions in the narrative. That unusual focus suggests she might be set up for a surprise death or, more fascinatingly, a massive backstory reveal.
And this brings up a running theory that could retroactively justify her inclusion in the final fight.
The Alice Krill theory.
Tell us about that.
It's a phenomenal piece of speculation that ties a seemingly secondary character directly into the central conflict. The theory suggests Karen was Alice Krill, one of the children experimented on by Brenner alongside Henry Krill, a.k.a. Vecna. She was perhaps the one who survived, but suppressed the memories so effectively that she became the disconnected suburban mother we know.
If that is true, then Vecna might return to finish what he started.
Exactly. Karen suddenly goes from being Mike's mom to being a former test subject and one of Vecna's original victims.
That would suddenly inject Karen into the central plot, giving her death profound personal meaning for Vecna. It gives the antagonist a direct personal victim who is also a secondary character connected to 2 protagonists.
It elevates her potential death from a mere plot device to a thematic resolution of Vecna's original cruelty.
And there's potential visual evidence supporting a dramatic death in the Wheeler household. The trailer analysis points to a scene where Nancy is seen wiping blood off her hand with this look of immense guilt and horror.
That guilt is absolutely key. Nancy, the seasoned monster hunter, is usually stoic. Her feeling guilt suggests she couldn't save someone she should have protected. The interpretation that this relates to the death of either Ted or Karen is very strong.
She might have been forced to choose which parent to save.
Or just failed to get them out of the house in time. They are in the optimal narrative position for a death, related to the main characters, old enough for their demise to be appropriate in the show's dark context, and functionally expendable to the immediate defeat of the final boss. They check all the boxes for maximum emotional damage with minimal plot disruption.
Okay, let's move to the wild cards and government figures, starting with Murray Bauman.
Murray is the definition of the unlikely survivor.
His whole arc has been one prolonged act of defying logical survival. Hacking government networks, surviving Russian prisons, navigating Cold War espionage, he has survived longer than anyone expected.
Mostly through a combination of paranoia and sheer luck.
Right. And he is now emotionally tethered to Joyce and Hopper. His death would certainly hurt, but his arc isn't centered around deep trauma or self-discovery like Steve or Max.
So since his character function is often high-stakes chaos mixed with comedic relief, what sort of death would he have that fixed the internal consistency of his character?
His predicted death style is very similar to Alexi's. It wouldn't be a heroic self-sacrifice. It would be something sudden, unexpected, and maybe even darkly comedic.
Emphasizing the sheer brutal absurdity of the Upside Down's invasion.
He is the kind of character who might, as the analysis suggests, crack a joke before dying, maintaining his irreverent personality right up to the end. His purpose is to inject high-stakes chaos, and his death would punctuate the unexpectedness of the final battle.
And now for the man who wears the moral gray area like a suit. Dr. Owens.
Owens is tragic complexity. He's one of the few government characters who genuinely cared about the kids, especially 11.
He acted as a genuine protector in later seasons.
But he was still intrinsically involved in Brenner's morally bankrupt, cruel experiments. He embodies the tragic difficulty of trying to do good within a broken system.
And so his death would serve a necessary function, redemption. His character arc just demands a final act of atonement.
Absolutely. Dying while helping the main cast escape, maybe sacrificing himself to secure a perimeter or blow up a facility, it's a perfect narrative conclusion for him.
And crucially, he knows a vast amount about 11, Vecna, and the inner workings of the Upside Down and the government's cover-ups.
So his death would ensure that he takes all that critical, sensitive information to the grave.
It eliminates the lingering threat of government interference once and for all. It's not just a personal redemption, it's a necessary strategic death to secure the future freedom of 11 and the rest of the surviving group. It closes the loop on the government conspiracy subplot.
And finally, the easiest prediction of all, the most inevitable end. Vecna, a.k.a. Henry, a.k.a. 1, the final boss rule.
This is ironclad. The core themes of the show light defeating dark, friendship overcoming all, love prevailing, they demand Vecna's permanent defeat. This is structured as a fantasy epic, even with the sci-fi elements. You don't set up the ultimate darkness and then allow it a graceful exit or a redemption arc.
There is no logical path for his redemption at this point. He is pure malevolence, the source of the evil.
He shed any semblance of his humanity, as Henry Creel. If any character is guaranteed to die in the final confrontation, it is Vecna. And his demise represents the total thematic resolution required to close the gates and end the series' core conflict.
He must die, and he must die at the hands of 11.
Using the power she temporarily gained through sacrifice or emotional bonding, it's the only way to deliver the earned final victory.
We've covered the entire spectrum then, from the untouchables to the inevitable antagonist. We've established that the younger kids are protected by genre, the core trio is protected by the fake-out precedent.
And fan favorites like Hopper and Max are protected by their completed emotional arcs.
The analysis hinges entirely on the show maintaining its strong internal narrative logic, which, thankfully, it has done remarkably well over 4 seasons.
And if that trajectory holds true, the ultimate emotional pain will come from the sacrificial duo Joyce or Jonathan, or the surprise deaths of the expendables like Karen or Murray.
The writers have successfully convinced us that they are willing to kill beloved characters, but they only do so when it serves a higher narrative purpose. The question for the final season is not if someone important dies, but which death provides the necessary closure for the largest number of surviving characters.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over as we await the final confrontation. If the narrative trajectory holds true, and we are looking at the 3 most likely high-impact sacrifices, Joyce, Jonathan, or Karen Wheeler, which loss would create the most powerful and enduring emotional legacy for the surviving characters?
Think about the lasting impact. Would it be the death of a parent, like Joyce, forcing Will, Might, and Eleven to finally grow up completely without adult guidance, cementing the theme that they are now the sole protectors of Hawkins?
Or would it be the death of a sibling, like Jonathan, changing the core dynamic between Will and Nancy forever? Or maybe a character like Karen, whose sacrifice is a shocking retrospective redemption for a backstory we never even knew existed. The choice the writers make here dictates the entire emotional color and the final lasting legacy of the series.
It's a heavy thought, but one essential for understanding the stakes and predicting the ultimate climax. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.